A trauma bay at 3 a.m. has a particular kind of silence. It's the silence before chaos, before the sirens pierce through and everything becomes blood, shouting, and the desperate fight to keep someone alive. I've worked in the emergency department at Mercy General Hospital in San Diego for 7 years now, and I thought I'd seen everything. Gunshot wounds, car accidents, overdoses, you name it. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on that October night, when a man without a name whispered 2 words that shattered my entire world. My name is Diane Foster, and before I tell you what happened, you need to understand who I was before that night. I grew up in a military family in Oceanside, just north of San Diego. My father served 22 years in the Navy, and my older brother Marcus followed in his footsteps, but he went a different route, special operations. We didn't talk much about what he did. We couldn't. Everything was classified, encrypted, buried under layers of security clearances I'd never have. Marcus was the golden child, the one who made our parents proud. I was the practical one, the one who became a nurse because I wanted to help people in ways I could see and measure. 3 years ago, 2 officers showed up at my apartment at 6 a.m. They told me Marcus had been killed in action during a classified operation overseas. No body, no funeral, just a flag, a medal, and a story I was told never to question. They said he died a hero. They said his sacrifice saved lives. They said a lot of things that were supposed to make the pain easier to swallow. It didn't work. I buried an empty casket and tried to move on with my life, throwing myself into my work, into saving the people I could actually save. That night started like any other. I was working the night shift, my usual rotation. The ER was unusually quiet, which always makes us nervous because we know it won't last. Around 3:15 in the morning, I was reviewing patient charts at the nurses' station when I heard it, the distant wail of sirens getting closer. Laura, one of the newer nurses, looked up at me with that mixture of anxiety and adrenaline we all know too well. Seconds later, the radio crackled. Incoming trauma. Male, approximately 35 to 40 years old, multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding, found unconscious near the waterfront. No identification. ETA 2 minutes. I snapped into action, heading to the trauma bay and prepping the space. Dr. Morrison, one of our best trauma surgeons, arrived moments later, already gloved up. The doors burst open, and the paramedics rushed in with the gurney. What I saw made my stomach turn. The man was covered in blood, his clothes torn and soaked through. But it wasn't just the amount of blood that caught my attention. It was the pattern of injuries. These weren't from a car accident or a random assault. The lacerations were too precise, too strategically placed. I'd seen injuries like this before, years ago, when Marcus had shown me photos from field hospitals overseas. Combat injuries. We transferred him to the bed, and I immediately began cutting away his shirt to assess the damage. Dr. Morrison barked orders. Get 2 large-bore IVs in. Type and cross for 6 units. Chest x-ray, fast exam. I worked mechanically, my hands steady even as my mind raced. Who was this man? Why was he here? Where were his injuries really from? As I placed the second IV, his hand suddenly shot up and grabbed my wrist. His eyes, previously closed, snapped open. They were gray, sharp, calculating. Even in his state, there was an awareness in those eyes that didn't match someone who should be barely conscious. His lips moved. I leaned closer, straining to hear over the chaos of the trauma bay, and then he said it. 2 words, barely a whisper. I'm done. My blood turned to ice, not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. The inflection, the cadence, the precise way those 2 words were delivered. It was Echo Protocol, the termination code Marcus's unit used to signal mission completion. I knew because Marcus had accidentally said it once during a phone call home, then immediately changed the subject and made me promise never to repeat it. It was burned into my memory. I stared at this stranger, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone in the room could hear it. His eyes locked onto mine, and I saw something there. Recognition? A plea? Before I could process it, his hand went limp, and he lost consciousness again. Dr. Morrison was calling my name, asking for vitals. I forced myself back into nurse mode, rattling off numbers, but my hands were shaking now. Who was this man? How did he know that code? And why did he say it to me? We stabilized him over the next 40 minutes. The injuries were severe, but not immediately life-threatening. 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung that we treated with a chest tube, multiple deep lacerations requiring sutures, and signs of significant blood loss. But again, the pattern was wrong. These were defensive wounds mixed with what looked like tactical injuries. This man had been in a fight, a serious one, and he knew how to protect vital areas even while being attacked. Once he was stable and moved to the ICU, I should have gone on with my shift. I should have moved to the next patient, filed my reports, and forgotten about him, but I couldn't. I kept seeing those gray eyes, kept hearing those 2 words. I'm done. During my break, I went to the registration desk and pulled up his file. John Doe. No identification. identification, no wallet, no phone, nothing. The police had been notified, but there were no missing persons reports matching his description. It was like he didn't exist. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. I couldn't focus. I made stupid mistakes, nearly gave the wrong medication to a patient, forgot to document a procedure. Laura asked if I was okay. I lied and said I was just tired. When my shift ended at 7 in the morning, I didn't go home. I went to the ICU. I told the charge nurse I wanted to check on the John Doe from the night before, that I'd been his primary nurse in the ER and wanted to follow up. She nodded and let me through. His room was at the end of the hall, room 412. I stood outside for a full minute, my hand on the door handle, trying to decide if I was making a huge mistake. Then I pushed it open. He was lying in the bed, connected to monitors, an oxygen cannula in his nose, chest tube draining into a collection chamber. His eyes were closed, but I could tell from his breathing that he wasn't deeply asleep. I approached slowly, checking his chart, pretending I had a clinical reason to be there. "I know you're awake," I said softly. His eyes opened immediately. There was that sharp awareness again. He studied my face for a long moment, then his gaze dropped to my ID badge, Diane Foster, RN. I watched as something shifted in his expression. "Foster," he repeated, his voice rough from the intubation. "Marcus Foster's sister." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. My knees almost gave out. "How do you—" "Echo 7, he interrupted. That was his call sign. Mine was Echo 9. We served together. The room spun. I gripped the bed rail to steady myself. "Marcus is dead," I said, but my voice betrayed me. It came out uncertain, questioning. He shook his head slightly, wincing at the pain. "That's what they told you. That's what they tell everyone. But Echo 7 is still in play. He's been in play for 3 years, and he's in trouble. That's why I'm here. That's why I risked everything to get to San Diego, to get to this hospital, to get to you." Before I could respond, before I could ask any of the 1,000 questions exploding in my mind, the door opened. I spun around. 2 men in dark suits stood in the doorway. They weren't doctors. They weren't hospital security. They had that unmistakable bearing, that cold professionalism. Federal agents, or worse. "Nurse Foster," the taller one said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You need to leave this room. Now." I looked back at the patient. His eyes were closed again, his face carefully neutral, but I'd seen the fear flash across it for just a split second. These men terrified him. "I'm just checking his vitals," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's stable and doesn't require further assessment at this time," the second man said. "Please exit the room." There was no room for argument in his tone. I walked out, my mind reeling, my heart hammering. As I passed them, the taller one spoke again. "Forget what you saw here. Forget what he said. For your own safety. It wasn't advice. It was a threat. If this story has you hooked already, subscribe to the channel now, because what comes next is going to surprise you even more. This is just the beginning, and I promise you, the truth is far stranger and more dangerous than you can imagine. I should have listened. I should have walked away, gone home, taken a sleeping pill, and forced myself to forget those 2 words and that face. But if you've ever lost someone you loved more than your own life, if you've ever been told to accept a truth that felt wrong in every fiber of your being, you'll understand why I couldn't let it go. Marcus wasn't just my brother. He was my best friend, my protector, the person who taught me how to be brave when I was terrified. And now a stranger was telling me he might be alive. I went home that morning, but I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch, still in my scrubs, staring at the folded flag on my bookshelf, the flag they'd given me at the memorial service, the one that was supposed to represent Marcus's sacrifice. Was it all a lie? I pulled out my phone and searched for the only photo I had of Marcus in uniform. It was from years ago, before he went into special operations, before everything became classified. He was smiling, his arm around my shoulders, both of us standing in front of the ocean. He looked so young, so full of life. Could he really be out there somewhere? By noon, I'd made a decision. I called the hospital and told them I was taking a personal day. Then I did something I'd never done before. I started digging. I pulled up the John Doe's medical records on the secure hospital portal, knowing I was violating about a dozen privacy laws and hospital policies. I studied every detail. His injuries, his vitals, his blood work. Everything was documented, except for one crucial thing. There were no photos. Standard protocol for unidentified patients is to take photographs for police identification purposes. His file had none. I expanded my search. I looked at the security logs for the ICU. There was no record of those 2 men in suits entering the building. No visitor check-in, no security clearance, nothing. It was like they were ghosts. Then I checked the ER admission logs from the night before. The paramedic report was there, but it was oddly brief. Found unconscious near the waterfront. That was it. No witness statements, no police report number, no additional details. For a John Doe case, especially one with suspicious injuries, there should have been pages of documentation. Something was very wrong. Someone was scrubbing records, controlling information, making sure this man remained invisible. The more I looked, the more questions I had, and the fewer answers I found. I spent the rest of the day obsessively searching, cross-referencing, looking for any clue that could tell me who this man was and whether what he'd said about Marcus was true. By evening, I was exhausted, frustrated, and no closer to answers. That's when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Diane Foster, a male voice, calm but urgent. "Who is this?" I demanded. "A friend of Marcus. We don't have much time. They're watching you now. After what happened this morning, you're on their radar. You need to be very careful about what you do next." My mouth went dry. "Who are you? How did you get my number?" "Those questions don't matter right now. What matters is that you understand the danger you're in. The man you spoke to this morning, Echo 9, he broke protocol by coming to you. He put himself and Marcus at risk. And now you're part of it whether you want to be or not." I stood up, pacing my small living room. "Is Marcus alive?" Silence on the other end. Then, "Yes, but not in any way that you'd recognize. He's been deep undercover for 3 years. His death was necessary for his cover. And before you ask, no, he couldn't contact you. Every connection to his old life is a vulnerability, a thread that could unravel everything and get him killed. Echo 9 shouldn't have told you anything." "Then why did he?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Because Marcus is in trouble, real trouble, and Echo 9 thought you had a right to know before—" He stopped abruptly. "Before what?" I demanded. "Before they make him disappear permanently." The line went dead. I tried calling back, but got a disconnected number message. I stood there, phone in my hand, trying to process what I'd just heard. Marcus was alive. He'd been alive for 3 years while I mourned him, while I visited his empty grave, while I tried to rebuild a life without him. And now he was in danger, and somehow, impossibly, I was the only person who could help him. The next morning, I went back to work. I had to. Missing another shift would raise questions, and apparently I was already being watched. I tried to act normal, going through my rounds, taking vitals, administering medications, but my mind was elsewhere. Every time I walked past the ICU, I thought about going to room 412. I needed to talk to Echo 9 again, to get more information, to understand what was happening. But I knew those men in suits were probably still there, or someone like them. During my lunch break, I made my way to the ICU under the pretense of checking on a former patient. I walked casually past room 412, glancing through the window. The bed was empty, stripped, clean, like no one had ever been there. I stopped, my heart sinking. I grabbed the first nurse I saw. "The John Doe in 412, where did he go?" She looked confused. "What John Doe? That room's been empty since yesterday morning. We're waiting for environmental services to do a deep clean before the next admission." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "No, there was a patient there. Trauma from the ER 2 nights ago. Multiple injuries, chest tube. I was his primary nurse." She shook her head. "I've been on since 7 this morning, and that room has been empty the whole time. You might be thinking of a different room." I checked the ICU census. Room 412, vacant. No recent discharges listed. No transfer orders. Nothing. It was like Echo 9 had never existed. I went to the ER and pulled up the admission records again. The John Doe entry from 2 nights ago was still there, but now it had been updated. Patient declined further treatment and left AMA against medical advice. Discharged at 0800 hours, but that was impossible. He'd been critically injured, connected to monitors, had a chest tube. He couldn't have just walked out. And more importantly, I'd been in his room after 8 that morning. Someone had altered the records. Someone with access to the hospital's medical database had erased him. I was standing at the nurse's station, staring at the computer screen, when Laura touched my arm. "Diane, you okay? You've been acting really strange lately." I forced a smile. "Just tired. Long shifts, you know." She didn't look convinced, but she let it go. The rest of my shift, I kept expecting those men in suits to appear, to pull me aside, to threaten me again. But they never came. Maybe they didn't need to. Maybe erasing Echo 9 from existence was message enough. That evening, I got home and found an envelope taped to my door. No postage, no return address, just my name written in block letters. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address in rural Arizona and a date, 2 weeks from now. Below that, a single sentence. "If you want the truth about Echo 7, be there. Come alone." No signature, no explanation. I sat on my floor, my back against the door, holding that paper like it was a live grenade. This was it. This was my chance to find out if Marcus was really alive, to see him, to get answers to 3 years of questions. But it was also clearly a trap, or a test, or something equally dangerous. The smart thing would be to tear up the paper, forget everything, go back to my normal life, but I'd never been good at doing the smart thing when it came to family. Thank you for staying with me this far. It means you're feeling what I felt when I lived through all of this. So subscribe now and turn on notifications, because what happens next changes everything. I'm Ray Tama. Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. Paranoid, obsessive, constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced I was being followed, watched, recorded. Maybe I was. I started varying my route to work, checking my apartment for hidden cameras or listening devices, being careful about what I said on the phone or in emails. My coworkers definitely noticed. Laura asked me point blank if I was in some kind of trouble. I told her I was dealing with family stuff, which wasn't entirely a lie. The hardest part was acting normal when everything inside me was screaming. I went to work, I took care of patients, I smiled and made small talk, all while counting down the days until that date on the paper. 14 days, 13 days, 12 days. Each one felt like an eternity. I researched the address during my off hours. It was in the middle of nowhere, about 30 miles outside of Tucson, Arizona. Just coordinates on a map. No visible structures in the satellite imagery. Nothing that explained why I was supposed to go there. I knew I should tell someone what was happening. Call the police. Report the threats. Show them the note. But what would I say? That a patient who apparently never existed told me my dead brother was alive. That mysterious men had erased hospital records. That I'd received an anonymous note telling me to drive to Arizona alone. They'd think I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. I started making preparations. I requested time off from work, claiming I needed to visit a sick aunt. I withdrew cash from my bank account, knowing credit cards could be tracked. I bought a prepaid phone and destroyed my old one. I told my landlord I'd be gone for a week and asked her to water my plants. Normal things that wouldn't raise suspicion. All while feeling like I was preparing to walk into the unknown and possibly never come back. The night before I was supposed to leave, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through every possible scenario. Best case, I'd find Marcus, he'd explain everything, and somehow we'd figure out a way through this mess. Worst case, I'd drive into a trap, disappear like Echo 9 had disappeared, and no one would ever know what happened to me. Most likely case, I'd drive 10 hours to Arizona, find nothing, and realize I'd been chasing ghosts and conspiracy theories born from grief and denial. I got up at 4 a.m, too wired to stay in bed. I made coffee, packed a small bag with clothes, basic supplies, my nursing license in case I needed identification, and the folded flag from my bookshelf. I don't know why I brought the flag. Maybe I wanted to throw it in Marcus's face if I found him, demand to know why he'd let me believe he was dead, or maybe I wanted something of his with me, just in case. The drive to Arizona was long and surreal. I left San Diego at 6 a.m, heading east on Interstate 8 through the desert. The landscape changed gradually, the coastal greenery giving way to brown scrubland and endless sky. I drove with the windows down, the hot air whipping through the car, the radio turned to some classic rock station that faded in and out. I had plenty of time to think, too much time. I replayed every conversation with Marcus from before he'd died. Had there been signs, hints that something was off, but everything had been classified, encrypted, hidden. He'd become a stranger long before those officers showed up at my door. I stopped once for gas and food at a small town called Gila Bend. The woman at the gas station counter looked at me with the kind of curiosity reserved for outsiders. Passing through? She asked. Yeah, I said. Visiting family. She nodded like she didn't quite believe me, but didn't care enough to press. I bought a sandwich I couldn't eat and got back on the road. The sun was starting to set when I reached Tucson. I found a cheap motel on the outskirts, paid cash for a room, and tried to rest. I had to wait until tomorrow, until the exact date on the note, before going to the coordinates. Breaking the instructions felt dangerous, like it would void whatever agreement I'd unknowingly entered into. So I waited, lying on a lumpy mattress in a room that smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner, watching bad television and trying not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. The next morning, I drove to the coordinates. They led me off the main highway, onto a series of increasingly rough dirt roads. My sedan wasn't built for this terrain, and I cringed every time the undercarriage scraped against rocks. The desert stretched out endlessly in every direction, dotted with saguaro cacti and scrub brush. No houses, no signs of civilization, just heat and silence, and the feeling that I was driving toward the edge of the world. Finally, I saw it. A small structure in the distance, barely visible against the landscape. As I got closer, I realized it was an old ranch house, weathered and sun-bleached, looking like it had been abandoned for years. There was a pickup truck parked outside, covered in dust. I pulled up next to it and killed the engine. For a long moment, I just sat there, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to find the courage to get out. The front door of the house opened. A man stepped out onto the porch, tall, lean, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, sunglasses covering his eyes. He stood completely still, waiting. I couldn't see his face clearly from this distance, but something about the way he stood, the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself, made my breath catch. I got out of the car slowly, my legs legs shaky, my heart pounding so hard I felt dizzy. I took one step toward the house, then another. The man removed his sunglasses, and I saw his face. 3 years older, thinner, a beard now, scars I didn't recognize, but unmistakably, impossibly, him, Marcus, my brother, alive, standing 20 feet away from me like he'd just come back from a trip to the grocery store instead of from the dead. I don't remember making the decision to run. I just did. I ran across that dusty yard and I hit him so hard we both almost fell over. I don't know if I was hugging him or hitting him or both. I was sobbing, screaming, incoherent. 3 years of grief and anger and confusion poured out of me all at once. He held me tight, one hand on the back of my head, and he kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, I'm sorry," over and over until the words lost meaning. We stood there in the desert heat, two people who'd been torn apart by lies and secrets and decisions made in rooms we'd never see by people we'd never know. And in that moment, nothing else mattered except that he was real, he was solid, he was alive. When I finally pulled back, I looked at him through tears and said the only thing I could think of. "You let me bury you." He nodded, his own eyes wet. "I know. You let me grieve. I know. Why?" That one word contained everything. Why did you do this? Why didn't you contact me? Why am I only learning the truth now? Why? Marcus gestured toward the house. "Come inside. I'll explain everything, or at least everything I can." We walked into the ranch house and I saw it was set up as a basic living space. Minimal furniture, supplies stacked in corners, maps and papers covering one wall. This wasn't a home. It was a safe house, a temporary shelter, a place to hide. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this story from? Write it in the comments below. It's incredible to see people from so many different places following stories like this. I'm inside that ranch house. Marcus told me everything, or at least he told me as much as he could without putting me in even more danger than I was already in. We sat across from each other at a battered wooden table, and he started from the beginning. 3 years ago, his unit had been conducting a high-value target operation in Eastern Europe. The mission went sideways. They'd been set up, ambushed, and someone in the intelligence chain had betrayed them. Half his unit was killed. The survivors, including Marcus, were officially declared dead to protect them from retaliation and to allow them to continue working on finding the leak. "They told us it would be temporary," Marcus said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "And something else. Regret, maybe. Or bitterness. 6 months. Maybe a year. Until they identified the traitor and neutralized the threat. Then we could reclaim our identities, go back to our families, resume our lives. But 6 months turned into a year. A year turned into 2. And the more we uncovered, the deeper the corruption went. It wasn't just one person. It was a network. People in positions of power who were selling intelligence to the highest bidder." I listened, trying to absorb information that sounded like it came from a spy novel, rather than my brother's life. "So you've been hunting these people for 3 years? He nodded. "What's left of our unit? Echo 7, Echo 9, Echo 3, and Echo 12. 4 of us out of an original team of 14. We've been working off the books, using our supposed deaths as cover, taking down the network piece by piece. But it's like cutting heads off a hydra. Every time we eliminate one player, 2 more appear." "Echo 9, I said suddenly. "The man at the hospital. He's the one who told me about you." Marcus's face darkened. "He wasn't supposed to do that. He broke protocol, put himself at risk, put you at risk, put the entire operation at risk. He said you were in trouble." Marcus stood up, pacing the small room like a caged animal. "We're all in trouble, Diane. We've been in trouble since the day this started. But yes, the situation has gotten worse. We identified the key player in the network, someone high up in the Department of Defense. We have evidence. But before we could act, they figured out we were still alive. Now they're hunting us just as hard as we've been hunting them." He stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "Echo 9 came to San Diego because he knew they were closing in on him. He'd been shot 2 days before you saw him, barely escaped with his life. He should have gone to one of our safe houses. But instead, he took a massive risk coming to you because he wanted you to know the truth. He wanted someone outside our unit to know that if we all disappeared, it wasn't because of enemy action. It was because our own government silenced us." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and terrible. "Where is he now?" I asked. Marcus shook his head. "I don't know. He went dark after leaving the hospital. That's code for either he's hiding or he's dead. I'm hoping for the former, but preparing for the latter." And I thought about those men in suits, the way they'd erased every trace of Echo 9 from the hospital records. Who were those men? The ones who came to his room? "Cleaners," Marcus said bitterly. "Not official agencies, not FBI or CIA. Private contractors hired to make problems disappear. They have access to everything. Medical records, security footage, government databases. They can erase a person's existence in hours hours and make it look like they were never there. That's what they did to Echo 9, and that's what they'll do to any of us if they catch us. I felt sick, and you brought me here, into this. I didn't bring you anywhere, Marcus said sharply. You came on your own, against my wishes, against protocol, against every safety measure we've put in place. When I heard Echo 9 had contacted you, I nearly lost my mind. And when I heard you'd been asking questions, pulling records, investigating, I knew I had to act. This, he gestured at the house, this meeting was the only way to keep you safe. Keep me safe? I stood up, anger replacing shock. You let me think you were dead for 3 years. You let Mom and Dad die believing they'd lost their son. You have no right to talk about keeping me safe. Mom and Dad are dead. Marcus went pale. I nodded, tears streaming down my face again. Dad had a heart attack 8 months after your funeral. Mom followed 6 months later. Broken heart, the doctor said. She never recovered from losing you. Marcus sat down heavily, like his legs had given out. He put his face in his hands. When he looked up, I saw the guilt, the pain, the cost of his choices written across his features. I didn't know. They don't tell us anything about our families. Total blackout. I've been dead to everyone for 3 years and I didn't know. His voice broke. I should have been there. I should have been at their funerals. You should have trusted me, I said. You should have found a way to tell me you were alive. Do you have any idea what these 3 years have been like? I blamed myself. I thought if I'd been a better sister, if I'd reached out more, if I'd understood what you were going through, maybe you wouldn't have been in that situation. I carried that guilt every single day. Marcus stood up and tried to approach me, but I backed away. Don't touch me right now. I need you to explain why I'm here. What happens next? Because I can't go back to my life pretending I don't know you're alive, but I also can't stay in your world. So what happens now? He took a deep breath. Now you make a choice. Option 1, you go back to San Diego, back to your life. You forget everything, never contact me, and I disappear again. Option 2, you come with me. We become ghosts. I can't promise safety, only a fighting chance to expose the people who did this to us. I stared at Marcus. Both options felt impossible. There's no option 3? We go to the authorities? Marcus laughed bitterly. The people we're fighting are the authorities. Senators, generals, intelligence directors. Going to them is suicide. I looked out at the desert sunset. My life in San Diego, my patience, my safety felt very far away, but I couldn't let my brother disappear again. I'm going back to San Diego, I said. Marcus nodded, expecting this, but I continued. I'm going back to be your eyes and ears. You need someone in the real world who isn't being hunted, someone to pass information. Marcus hesitated. It's too dangerous. If they connect you to me, they already have, I interrupted. I'm a trauma nurse. I'm trained to stay calm when everything is falling apart. If anyone can handle this, it's me. Reluctantly, he agreed. We spent the next 6 hours going over protocols, dead drops, coded messages, and how to spot surveillance. If you're ever compromised, he warned, you burn everything and run. Don't try to save the operation. Save yourself. We said our goodbyes in the dusty yard. Stay safe, I whispered. I drove away, watching him disappear into the desert landscape, crying because I'd found my brother only to lose him again. Back in San Diego, life became surreal. I worked my shifts, knowing I was being watched. 2 weeks later, I found a flyer on my windshield with a hidden pattern. Decoded, it led me to a storage unit containing a USB drive. For 3 months, I lived a double life, collecting damning evidence of corruption that stretched from military contractors to the Pentagon. Then, it fell apart. I came home one morning to find my door ajar. I didn't enter. I called the emergency number Marcus gave me. It went straight to voicemail. I checked into a motel, waiting. When I finally returned to my apartment 3 days later, the place had been tossed. The evidence was gone. I was compromised. As I packed to run, my phone rang. Diane Foster, a woman's voice. I'm Catherine Walsh, Deputy Director at the DOJ. I've been running a parallel investigation into the network you're fighting. Your apartment is compromised, and federal agents are minutes away. Come to this address if you want to live. I had no choice. I met her in a downtown office. Your brother is the key, Catherine said, but he's been captured by the people we're trying to bring down. If we don't extract him in 48 hours, he's dead. She proposed a plan. I would use an emergency signal to trick Marcus into thinking his unit was extracting him. Instead, Catherine's team would secure him. It was a gamble, but the alternative was his death. I placed the classified ad, Echo 7, the birds fly at dawn, red sky extraction. He replied, confirmed. At dawn, we waited near an abandoned warehouse. I sat in an unmarked car with 2 agents while Catherine's tactical team set up. At 6:03 a.m., Marcus appeared, walking warily toward the entrance. He paused, sensing something wrong. Then, hell broke loose. Gunfire erupted from all sides. Catherine's team had been compromised. It was an ambush. The agents in my car drew weapons, but Marcus was suddenly there, blood on his face, pulling me out. We need to go. We ran through back alleys until we collapsed in an empty loading dock. Catherine said she'd protect you, I cried. Catherine might be real DOJ, Marcus gasped, but her team is dirty. That's how the cleaners found us. He made a frantic call, then turned to me. I have a backup plan, but you can't come. It's too dangerous. You have to disappear completely, not with me, alone. Marcus, please, he begged. I couldn't save my unit. Let me save you. He handed me an address. Go there. They'll give you a new identity. Don't look back. I walked away. I followed the address to Chinatown, where I received a new passport and a bus ticket. Diane Foster ceased to exist. That was 8 months ago. I'm living in rural Oregon now under a different name. I don't know if Marcus is alive. I don't know if the evidence ever saw the light of day. I live in limbo, looking over my shoulder every time I hear sirens. The worst part isn't the fear. It's the uncertainty, not knowing if our sacrifice mattered. But I'm alive. And as long as we're both breathing, there's a chance the truth will come out. Until then, I survive. I adapt. I wait, just like Marcus taught me. So what do you think? Would you have trusted Catherine? Would you have disappeared like I did? Or stayed to fight? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this story moved you, if it made you think about loyalty and the price of truth, subscribe to this channel. There are more stories like this waiting to be told. Click the next video to continue the journey.